The Roman Empire, one of the most powerful states of antiquity, is slowly but surely allowing a new influence to take root within its catacombs and its houses. Christianity, a radical new religion from the province of Judea, is developing all over the empire, with its monotheism and assertion that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the promised Messiah, contrasting intensely with traditional Roman paganism. The Christians are subjected to brutal state-sanctioned persecution. All this changes when a new emperor rises to power in AD 306, after experiencing a mystical vision that he credited with giving him victory in an important battle. The Emperor Constantine becomes a supporter of Christianity and ultimately a Christian convert. Beginning with the Edict of Milan in AD 313, Constantine legalizes Christianity and effectively paves the way for the eventual total Christian dominance of the empire. The art made by Roman Christians seems to have been especially impacted by this Constantinian shift. The first images of Jesus are humble and nondescript, depicting him as a young, moderately dressed shepherd, healer, and preacher. Compare this, however, to the kind of depictions we see gaining popularity in post-Constantinian churches. Jesus is presented as a triumphant, dominant figure, very much so in the image of a king or emperor. The term for this perceived shift is the theory of the emperor Mystique, which basically holds that Christian artists appropriated imperial Roman themes and symbolism to their own depictions of Jesus. This theory is not universally accepted, and it is controversial. One of the strongest voices opposing the Emperor Mystique theory is the retired Professor Thomas Matthews, who opposes the theory on two main grounds. He argues that its first proponents were influenced by personal biases and imperial nostalgia, in that the visual aspects of the Greco-Roman pantheon were more influential on Christian art than depictions of the emperors. However, Matthews' arguments seem to lack that kind of strong basis which could definitively disprove the Emperor Mystique. In fact, he provides no evidence that even suggests that the image of Christ as a triumphant ruler has zero connection to depictions of the Roman emperor. Furthermore, there was a strong overlap in the classical Roman world between the Greco-Roman pantheon and the worship of the emperor himself. Indeed, both alive and deceased emperors were often considered divine, worshipped as gods themselves, which was reflected in their artistic depictions. Matthews seems to imply then that the depictions of Greco-Roman gods are in a separate category from depictions of the emperors, which basically does not hold water. The argument of Professor Jennifer Freeman seems by comparison more reliable and nuanced. She claims that the Emperor Mystique theory does not have to be necessarily interpreted as representing a clean break between different depictions of Jesus. She states, "These two motives are in fact not as different as they initially appear, and thus the transition between and coexistence of the two pose no significant theological or ideological problems for their viewers. That is, the Good Shepherd and the enthroned Christ do not represent a clean distinction between pre- and post-Constantinian Christianity." Freeman argues that Christ as a Good Shepherd and Christ as imperial ruler are simply different kinds of stylistic choices. In fact, she draws on a broader historical record of antiquity to show how both shepherd and king imagery have a tradition of representing power throughout the ancient world. For example, a common motive attributed to ancient rulers was that they were the shepherds of the people, defending and guiding them. So while Freeman leaves open room for the Emperor Mystique theory, she makes it clear that there was definitively no clean break or rigid evolutionary process towards the representation of Christ as a ruler. This fits in with the Emperor Mystique theory, as there is no definite interpretation of it that states explicitly that there was a clean break in depictions of Christ. Ultimately, the most probable analysis is that imperial-style representations of Jesus were indeed influenced by imperial Roman imagery, but not necessarily in a rigid one-way evolution, but rather as a new type of style that neither contradicted nor completely replaced the original depictions of Christ. Ultimately, the most probable analysis is that imperial-style representations of Jesus were indeed influenced by imperial Roman imagery, but not necessarily in a rigid, one-way evolution, but rather as a new type of style that neither contradicted nor completely replaced the original depictions of Christ. While a variety of post-Constantinian depictions of Christ as a dominant ruler are available, we will focus on 4 particular Italian churches that show the influence of Roman imperial motifs in their depictions of Jesus. In the Church of Saint Pudenziana in Rome, we find an image of Christ often used by proponents of the Emperor Mystique theory. Here, Jesus' depiction reflects certain key artistic elements used to portray Roman emperors. We have frontality, which means that the subject is viewed from the front. Around Jesus' head is an aureole, or radiant light, which influenced the development of the Christian halo. Jesus is seated on a throne and surrounded by others, and the general mosaic itself is located in an apse, a semicircular space in a basilica or church. In the Church of St. Andrew in Ravenna, we find one of the most visually explicit characterizations of Christ as emperor yet. Jesus is presented as a triumphant warrior ruler, clad in armor and a royal cloak. The elements of frontality and the aureole are also present. The Church of Saint Vitale in Rome hosts yet another image of a dominant Christ. The elements of frontality, enthronement, being surrounded, the presence of the aureole, as well as the apse location are all present. But there is another intriguing symbol associated with the emperors. One can see Christ seated upon a blue circle. This in fact is the so-called Cossack sphere motif, in which a Roman emperor is depicted with or holding a circle or globe that represents the world or the universe, signifying his supreme rule. In a similar manner, this portrayal is indicating Jesus' supreme rule over the universe. Finally, let's look at the image of Jesus in the Church of Saints Cosmas and Damian in Rome. The frontality is present, the aureole is present, and he is surrounded by gift bringers, not to mention the mosaic is again in an apse. Now the unique imperial style element here is the ascension to heaven, influenced by a common imperial motive of apotheosis, meaning becoming divine or becoming a god. This was attributed to deceased emperors who were portrayed ascending into the heavens and attaining divinity. Of course, the main contrast between the pagan Roman concept of this and the Christian one is that Jesus was seen as not becoming divine, as he already was divine from the start. So this is purely a stylistic choice that does not necessarily represent the same meaning as in the pagan tradition. From all these examples, one can clearly see the direct influence from Roman artistic traditions and motifs. So does the Emperor Mystique theory have it right? It arguably does, at least to an extent. What is for certain though, is the creative importance of these beautiful works of art. They reflected the creative expression of a young, ambitious religion, which was becoming the new dominant force of Rome and will alter the course of Western civilization forever.